We're a nonprofit organization that's been around since 1987 to improve the plight of Indian agriculture. We're a membership organization that reaches from Alaska to Florida, from California to Connecticut, Montana to New Mexico. You know, we've been producing food here since before the time of Christ, which means our ancestors, our grandfathers, our grandmothers, our moms, dads have been doing this for a long time. Our identity is attached to the land. Who is going to carry this age-old tradition on?
Because you know we're all about that ag, it's tribal. We're all about that ag, it's tribal. We're all about that ag, it's tribal. We're all about that ag. Yeah, it's pretty clear. We used to process food, but we can grow it like we're supposed to do. We got that food that native folks crave. Got all the right crops and all the right places. We see the store shelves, working those chips and pop. We know that stuff ain't real. Come on and make a swap. It's time we feed ourselves. Just raise them up, cause every nation's his creation. Got some food you cannot stop. You know our ancestors passed along things that were wise and true. I can take care of the land and the land will take care of you. Travel. And if you help the animals and the crops, you can get right. And those crops and animals will help keep our tribes alive. Because you know we're all about that ag, it's tribal. We're all about that ag, it's tribal. We're all about that ag, it's tribal. We're all about that ag, hey. We're bringing tribal back. Feeding ourselves cause we know where it's at. Food sovereignty is anything but wet. I'm here to tell you that the cause is going strong and you have got to come along. You know our ancestors passed along things that were wise and true. I can take care of the land and the land will take care of you. Travel. And if you help the animals and the crops, you can give them right. And those crops and animals will help keep our tribes alive. Because you know we're all about that ag, it's tribal. We're all about that ag, it's tribal. We're all about that ag, it's tribal. We're all about that ag.
So I think we did that video, I don't remember, maybe 2015, can't quite remember, but it's just crazy to see how far the whole IAC youth program. 1 second.
Awesome. Okay, so Azalea, I'm going to start. It's already been recording. I thought I'd record that video, but I'm going to start live streaming onto Facebook. Dan, were you going to do an announcement about the surveys, or how did you want to proceed?
Sorry, experiencing a little technical difficulties there with YouTube. Yeah, I'm gonna just quick share a screen. We have we've got what IAC is collecting survey information right now, and we could use your help in collecting this information that is going to be used, that is being used to help with our policy development and advocacy efforts. If you go to indianag.org, find it, or just go to Indian Ag, look for COVID-19 resources. In addition to the surveys, we've got information on a farm loan relief program and quite a bit of other information on there as well. So continuing to put some plugs in for that for the rest of the day. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Azalea to get us kicked off.
All right. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm Azalea Yazi, and I'll be the moderator for today's session for the virtual Intertribal Food Summit Youth Roundtable discussion. So we're just gonna start up with introductions. So like I said, my name's Azalea Yazi. I'm Blackfeet and Navajo. I'm currently going to school for sustainable agriculture at San Diego City Community College, and I'm one of the leadership development specialists for IAC. And I've been involved with IAC youth programming since about 2016, and I just recently got hired on as the leadership development specialist last year. So, okay, so we're gonna go down the line like I see. So Marco.
Hey everyone, my name is Marco Wando. I am from the Shoshone-Paiute tribes of the Duck Valley Indian Reservation in northern Nevada and southern Idaho, but I currently live in the state capital of Idaho, which is Boise, going to school at Boise State University, double majoring in political science and business administration, with triple minoring in Canadian studies, communication, and psychology. And currently right now I work back home with my home tribe with their emergency operations center to handle the pandemic. And I've been with the IAC for about almost 3 years now. And I'm also the Northwest representative on the Native Youth Food Sovereignty Alliance Board of Directors.
Great. Next I see on my screen is Mariah.
Okay, my name is Mariah Gladstone. I am Blackfeet and Cherokee, live in Montana. I have an undergraduate degree in environmental engineering from Columbia, and I'm finishing up my master's in environmental science from SUNY ESF in Syracuse, New York. I am also the founder of Indigenous Kitchen, and I work in teaching traditional food information, revitalizing traditional foods. And I've been doing things with the IAC in different capacities for about 4 years now. I'm also the Rocky Mountain representative on the
Okay, then next is Robert.
Hello, everyone. My name's Robert Baldy. I am a Hoopa tribal member. I am currently living in Hoopa, California on the Hoopa Reservation. My schooling is just a high school degree, graduate, and that's about it. I went to about a year of college, but that was about it. My occupation right now is a garden manager for the KTWC, which is the Climate Trinity Resource Conservation District. And I'm also on the board for the KTRCD. And I think I've been involved with IAC for about 5 years now. So it's been a pretty cool experience.
Good to hear. Kyle.
Yat HDO Shirine, she Kyle White Yinchia, Kia Aninishlanto, not Otine, Tachini Bashashin, Dage Chini Dutch Chado Tohan Dashanella, these was Nedishkis that Nasha, Agut Ego Denenishlan, University in New Mexico de Inchtat, Digut Ego de Jose Dole Ahihat. Hello, everyone. My name is Kyle White. I am from the Checkerboard Navajo Reservation in Crown Point, New Mexico. I am currently living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, trying to earn my degree in biology. I want to use that for food sovereignty, food systems, nutrition, public health, research works. I am affiliated with the Navajo La Casa Roja youth group, as well as serve as a board member on the Native Youth Food Sovereignty Alliance. I've been involved with the IAC for quite a while.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, Lucas.
Sagolis Pakwik, Lucas ni Yungets on Yote Aga ni Dalaguane ni Uaganyo, Waguajo, ni Ukiloda. Hello everybody, my name is Lucas Humblet. I'm from the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin, and I'm currently living in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I've been involved with the IAC since 2016. Been a youth leader at a couple of their events and I keep getting involved with them. I love what they're doing. Right now, I'm currently a seed regeneration supervisor at Dream of Wild Health. Dream of Wild Health is an indigenous owned and operated nonprofit organization based out of Minneapolis. And I am a co-founder and operator at All You Seal, which is a personal farm of mine. We rent a half acre and we grow vegetables for market and we grow seeds there. So that's about what I got for you.
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our questions. So the first thing that I think a lot of people are wondering about what everyone's doing during this quarantine. So what have you all been doing to keep yourself busy during this time in quarantine? And we're going to go ahead and go in the same order. So Marco, we'll go first.
Well, back home, like I said earlier, I work for the Shoshone Paiute tribes, and we have set up an emergency operations center where we pretty much deal with anything to prevent the spread of COVID-19 hitting our reservation. So far, we've been really fortunate to have no confirmed cases on the reservation. And pretty much I just work in the logistical division of the operations center where I handle donations, distribution of food that we get from the National Guard, and just overall handling of priorities and needing, in the event of someone getting positive, we'll grant them a house, food, and making sure that they're quarantined and everyone stays home and just stays safe. So that's pretty much what I've been doing 6 days a week for the past 2 months.
Great. Mariah?
NIFSA board. Yeah, so I just bought a house in the past couple months on the Blackfeet Reservation. So I am back home in lockdown in Blackfeet country. And part of that has been just getting my garden ready, been planting, starting a lot of seeds, trying to get my bow sighted in, get ready for hunting season in the fall. And then volunteered with a couple of different food distribution programs on the reservation to kind of work on making sure that the organizations that are doing that work are able to cope with the expanded needs during this weird time. So been working with that as well. And then teaching traditional cooking classes online instead of in person like I normally do.
Great. Next I see is Kyle.
So ever since the start of quarantine, I decided to stay in the city in Albuquerque because I was afraid of possibly bringing back the virus to my community on Checkerboard Navajo and possibly exposing that to my family, young children, our elders, and my entire community. This was before Navajo Nation didn't have such high cases of COVID-19. So during my time, I've just been working on small projects like my mixed media arts. I recently made an art website that showcases my portfolio, sketches, commissions. My goal is to build my small business and take time to create meaningful concentrations. For instance, I have ideas focusing on food sovereignty and art therapy, merging both to artistically give an accurate portrayal of what foods Native families eat at home, whether it be traditional or non-traditional foods, and how I envision Indigenous food sovereignty to look like. So like to complete this project, I will be using artworks and write-ups from participants who've completed my art therapy session and having them follow the prompts that I've had them use, like draw yourself as your favorite food or draw foods that you and your family make at home. But most importantly, I think using their analysis of what they drew by asking them questions like, why did they choose this food? Or how do they feel about this food? Or Are there any emotional connections to the food they chose or the color choices? Because I think it's important to creatively document how our people live and share these stories of what it means to be food sovereign. There's still a lot of work that I have to do. It's still an ongoing process, but I'm happy to share more with others if any are interested.
That's a great artistic approach. Next is Lucas.
Yeah, man, that sounds so cool, Kyle. Yeah, I've been staying busy by doing a lot of farming. Since this whole thing hit, it's been farming or planning for farming this whole season. Probably working like 60, 70 hours a week. Some days it's sun up to sundown, 7 days a week. So been really busy with that. When this first started, you know, we were just in the planning phase of our personal farm. We had a lot to work out. We had to draw up all of our crop plans and do our seed orders, see who we all wanted to grow with this year and source them ethically and organically. So we had to do a lot of research on that. We had to do more research on best practices of growing those individual crops too, you know, see what their preferred spacing is. And I took up a lot of time at the beginning of the whole pandemic. And then as time went on, we still had to get stuff into the ground. So both of the farms that I'm at, we've developed COVID protocols, safety protocols. So we're all wearing masks all the time in the field. If we're harvesting right by each other, we're wearing masks in the hot 90-degree days, which isn't too fun, but we still got to do it to assure the safety of whoever's receiving our food. We're social distancing when we can, you know, if we're having a meeting, not standing within 6 feet of each other, try doing as much meetings virtually as we can. And yeah, just having extra clean hygiene during this. So that takes up a lot of things. Yeah, just been really busy, really excited for what's to come this season yet. It's just the season's just starting. We had our first harvest today, actually. And tomorrow's my first farmer's market, so I'm really excited about that. We've been looking forward to it for the past couple weeks, and yeah, really excited for that. So that's about what I got.
That's really exciting. Glad to see that you're not cooped up inside and you're just out there all day.
Yeah, no, there hasn't been really any time being cooped up inside. It seems like my life has just stayed the same throughout that whole thing, so, you know.
Cool. All right, Robert?
For me, during the quarantine, I haven't really been quarantining because I have to work every day, because when you're a gardener, you can never have a day off. You always have to be out there tending your crops. So I've been working at the community garden, continuing doing work there, but I've actually been busier helping out people getting their own backyard garden started. So our the KTRCD actually bought a rototiller so that we can go to people's properties, and we've been tilling up their ground so they can get ready to grow their own backyard garden, so that they can get ready in case like this whole quarantine thing gets worse and people aren't able to get out and go to the stores more. So we're getting them more ready to be able to feed themselves. And also I've been helping my mom out with some safe preservation classes, such as like pressure canning, water bath canning, different types of techniques of preservation, like smoking and stuff. I did one class with her. It was actually canning chili beans, something delicious to eat, and plus it stayed good for a long time. And my mom's been doing a lot of canning classes to show our community how to safely preserve their food for as long as they possibly can, so that they're ready in case anything gets worse from here until into the future. So that's basically what I've been doing in the community. Yeah, that's basically what I've been doing during quarantine.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear that everyone's staying busy and still managed to give back to their community at the same time, which is really impressive. I know I've been trying to stay busy as well, just like you guys, and stay outside as much as I can instead of being cooped up in my little house by myself. But All right, let's move on to the next question, which sort of follows the topic of the quarantine and the pandemic. So, in what ways have you guys witnessed the connection between this pandemic and your community's food sovereignty or food systems? So Marco, if you want to start it off.
Yeah, so for my community, we've been hit really hard with the pretty much the slowdown of the economy and the processing and delivery of our food that we get. For some context, my community is a small rural ranching community, 100 miles in north and south from the nearest Walmart, McDonald's, or any other outside city. So we're very isolated, very far away from the rest of pretty much civilization, even here in the lower 48. But it has some struggles with that. It's ironic to say, but it's been the perfect time to have a quarantine because our food systems back home on our reservation are just blooming up. Our Camas Prairie is blooming at max capacity right now. Our fish are larger than ever. All our migrating animals, such as mule deer and elk, have returned back home for the summer. So it's a really good time for our people to start returning back to their old ways of returning back to their own traditional foods that we used to eat, and we still continue to eat. And it's been a pretty cool opportunity to witness everyone slowly returning back to our traditional ways of eating and enjoying the foods that we enjoyed for centuries, despite the slowdown of modern society pretty much for us.
Great, sounds like even though that this is happening, there's still the positive side of that reconnection from your tribe to like your essential tribal foods. All right, Mariah?
Yeah, I think we are in a similar position, like Marco was saying, in that we still have access to a lot of our traditional foods, and that is fortunate. What I've tried to do is, create materials that helps people recover some of that information about how to prepare them. I think that we've also seen a realization by a lot of people about the necessity of food sovereignty and how important it is that our producers in our community are able to get our food directly to our people, and the disconnect that currently exists with having to send a lot of the cattle that are being raised on the reservation away from the reservation to be processed and then sold back to us at premiums because of that huge transport cost. So there's been a lot of talk in the community about the importance of having processing facilities. How do we set up gardens in our communities? The local hardware stores are all sold out of peat moss because so many people are trying to garden in the community that, that demand was not previously there, but now there's this huge realization. There is this big disconnect or a big connection that's happening in that people are realizing how our isolated location or relatively rural location has a lot of advantages in that we've been able to stay fairly safe from this pandemic, but the consequences that have come along with it have been a lot primarily related to food. And so we've also seen a lot of generosity in the community. There was a farmer that wasn't from the reservation, but normally he sells potatoes to restaurants and wasn't able to sell them to restaurants because so many restaurants were closed or they were just having such reduced demand that he instead donated 10,000 pounds of potatoes to Blackfeet Reservation, and we got to go bag them up and distribute them to different families. So, we've also seen stuff like that happen, a lot of generosity and a lot of community togetherness around food sovereignty now, which is inspiring and hopefully a silver lining.
Great. Yeah, I think there's definitely been a lot of ups and downs with this pandemic and seeing the disconnect between our tribal foods and our tribal people, but then also that's a positive of realizing what we can do to fix that issue and be more food sovereign. I believe Kyle is next.
I see this connection between this pandemic and my community's food sovereignty food systems as bringing the nation turmoil, hardships, because as you may all know, Navajo Nation was hit pretty hard by COVID-19. A lot of the communities on Navajo suffered financially, environmentally, mentally, and much more. Many of my relatives' food access came from the nearest and only supermarket, convenience stores, and other food markets that cost extra time and money to travel to. I'm describing a food desert, but to make it 1,000 times worse, COVID-19 gave no choice for our tribal nation to go on several 57-hour lockdowns every weekend, starting from Friday and ending on Sunday. What was the biggest concern was how were children, families, elders, and other community members going to survive when they were restricted from leaving their homes. And if they were to leave, they would be penalized a $1,000 fine. Then came many public health groups taking notice of what was happening. Many specialists started finding funding for food aid box kits, which consisted of basic groceries like produce, packaged foods, pet food, sanitation products, and water. However, this service was made only available for priority community members like our elders, families, nursing homes, foster homes. But despite all of these dilemmas, I think that what COVID-19 taught my tribe and my community is that it takes a dauntless commune of relatives to strategize what needs are essential and always look out for one another. No one is independent and abandoned because what we use is a clanship system called Ke, which is basically a kinship system that has matrilineal attributes that builds effective action and solidarity for all relatives, even those outside of Dene. I see this as an opportunity for my tribe and community to build native-owned sustainable agriculture productions so that when the next wave hits, Navajo and other tribes will not suffer as much as today.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I would also love to see that implemented in many other tribes too, and especially the Navajo Nation. Okay, so Lucas.
Yeah, you know, I think a big theme I'd say would be togetherness. I'm a part of a couple different communities. I'd say I'm part of my tribal community, but I live off the reservation a couple hours away from it. I'm part of a community here in Minneapolis, and I'm a part of a Upper Midwest Indigenous Seed Keepers Network. I'd say I'm a part of that community. So I think togetherness is a big theme that I'm seeing. In Oneida, the people are more interested, I think, more than ever about growing their own foods, you know, including our traditional white corn or even beans and squash and tomatoes and other vegetables. People are taking a lot more interest in that. We have our tribal farm there, and they do a plant drive every year. They distribute seed starts. And I think in return, they receive like non-perishable foods. And there were so many more people that were interested in it this year. There was a lot more community gardens put in. There's a cooperative that formed a couple of years ago, and they are getting seeds into the hands of the people of our community. They were doing curbside drop-offs or curbside pickups of some of the seeds. You know, people just contact them and say, hey, we want to grow some corn or beans or squash this year, and then they'd go drop it off at their curb or their mailbox, something like that. So everyone is trying to work together for the same cause of getting food, healthy food, into the hands of our community. I think that's a big thing, is the food, where we're going to get our food from. And here in Minneapolis, you know, we had those riots a couple weeks ago. I live a couple blocks away from where the police station burnt up and where the Target was looted. So, you know, where are people going to go to get their food now? If people are relying on that Target, that's where they're shopping, you know, nobody can go in there, you know, that whole area is a mess. So I think a lot of the farmers, they're trying to provide healthy food to get that to the food shelves, and people who have access to resources, they are buying food from elsewhere and donating that to food shelves or food distribution areas. It's wonderful. A couple days after that police station burnt, my street was lined up with cars dropping off foods, carfuls of food at a church and at a middle school. And that was all getting into the hands of people that needed it, that were affected by it. You know, people's houses apartments were, they were right next to it, so they had to leave the area and they don't have food anymore. And in that Indigenous Seed Keepers Network, you know, I think togetherness is still a theme there. There's going to be seed shortages planned for next year. You know, seed companies, they are running out of their seed stocks this year because everybody's taking interest in growing food. So seed companies are running out of seed stocks. They're digging into next year's supplies already. So there's projected seed shortages. So this Indigenous Seed Keepers Network, we're working together to try and have a plan to grow seeds to distribute to everybody, you know, getting actual ethical seeds into the hands of the people. So I think that's working together instead of just worrying about ourselves and right around us. We're working to get seeds also to the community. So yeah, that's what I got.
Great. Yeah, it sounds like you said, the upside was definitely bringing everybody together, then having that direct line from the farmers to the tribal people and the communities. So it's good to hear. Robert?
I think the connection I've seen from the pandemic to my community is that there's a lot more people that I haven't had a previous interest in growing or growing their own food, or interest in food sovereignty, are now trying to get into it. I see a lot more people gathering, hunting, fishing, and I see a lot more people wanting to start small gardens in their backyards. Like I said last time, I said we were helping people till up their ground so they can get their own home garden started. We had to do that because there was a really big interest in it. And another thing is, I feel like a lot more people are interested in learning food sovereignty and preservation as well. So there's a lot more people wanting to learn how to can and preserve their own food. And there's a lot more people wanting to just learn about how to sustain themselves if they need to for months or long periods of time when they can't feed themselves or go to a grocery store or something. So I'm just mainly trying to help people out, make sure that they are able to do that. I see a huge spike in a lot more people wanting to grow their own, start their own pig operation too. My dad, he has a pig operation, so he sells hogs to people in the community. He really tries to get back to our community as much as possible. We just recently had a litter of pigs, and they sold out within the day because everyone was interested and they want their own beef, their own pork and stuff. So I see a lot more people interested in the work that I've been doing. So, I mean, it's good in a sense that more people are interested, but also bad because of the pandemic. So it's making more people kind of worry about their livelihood more than they wanting to come into it because it's a good idea, because everyone needs to learn how to preserve their own, learn how to grow their own food and preserve their own food. But I mean, I'm glad that everyone's wanting and willing to learn about it. And that's all I got.
Great. Yeah, it sounds like you guys are all trying your best to give back to your community and stay involved as much as possible despite the setback of the pandemic. So let's go into our next question, which is, what type of agriculture work have you all been involved lately? I know you guys have touched a little bit on the different cooperatives you guys have been involved in, and maybe the different teaching classes that you have also been involved in. But yeah, this can include like gardening or like volunteer work, community work, any sort of agriculture work. So, Marco, if you want to begin.
Yeah, so like I said in my previous talk discussion, we've been really focused on harvesting some of the natural, more traditional foods that have been growing on our reservation. So one of them is camas root, which is more like a flower that you eat the bulb of that grows between the months of May and June during our water year. And we've been collecting tons and tons of camas root because it is a staple food for the Western Shoshone and Northern Paiute peoples in my area. We as well been hunting a lot of trout and bass in our rivers and our lakes to get that more protein side of things, getting all the necessary nutrients. I'm a huge fan of trout, so I've been pretty content with fishing trout pretty much every day, it seems like. And since our reservation closed off our fishing to non-tribal members, tribal members get the opportunity to enjoy the recreation that we have out to offer that we normally don't get to utilize when it's during the busy season. Another thing that we've been focused on has been with this program called Duck Valley Growers. So it's establishing hoop houses in many homes and subdivisions on the reservation that people want to start growing crops. Pineapple has been a surprisingly food that people have been growing out there. You wouldn't think that it would grow out there, but for some reason, pineapples pretty much grow pretty regularly in the hoop houses and in the greenhouses that we have. So it's a pretty interesting dynamic and something certainly unexpected that will grow anywhere. And then just overall, just helping with my family's hay operations, pretty much tilling, getting out on a slother, driving that around, chopping up hay. Our first cut is going to be in a couple of weeks, so we're patiently waiting for that to hit the right length and to start baling hay for the winter months. So we're just pretty much preparing for that. And so it's been pretty fun with the agricultural side of things back home.
Yeah, that pineapple thing sounds really interesting. I didn't know that they would be growing up there, but that's good to hear. Mariah?
I think if you can grow pineapple there, then you guys are going to be unstoppable. So I mentioned some of the things that I've been doing, getting my garden started, which has been a challenge. Everything from, managing to like clean up a yard, get a new space ready for a garden that has not had one in it, to a massive hailstorm with dime-sized hail that decided to attack all of the plants, and a danger of frost that never really disappears where we are. So it's a fun challenge, but it's part of the fun of feeding ourselves. And then of course, foraging. So it's been fun to look around and see the different plants. Some are in bloom right now, like we have camas here that's in bloom. After it goes to seed, we can harvest it. We'll have berry bushes that are in bloom right now. So lots of Savis berries. We'll have thimbleberries. There'll be some different currants that are out, choke cherries, huckleberries, different things like that. So it's kind of fun to scout out the berry picking places based on where the bushes are that are blooming. And then looking at other things. So there was glacier lilies earlier in the year that could be foraged. And then I live on a lake, so been trying to pull out trout from there because there's really good trout fishing, but I also need to learn how to fly fish because this is a fly fishing lake. So learning new skills, trying different things, but it's been super fun and just keeping me super busy, super involved. And then I mentioned some of the things with volunteering with some of the food distribution programs as well. So lots of fun, lots of staying busy.
It all sounds good except for that hail. I don't know if I could ever get used to that. All right. Kyle?
To be honest, I have not been physically active with my agricultural work like gardening, planting, and whatnot. I did continue to stay active with my Native Youth Councils virtually. So a lot of the work consisted of essential services that needed to be accessible to Native youth and other community members. For instance, in my Navajo Public Health Council, we wrote letters to tribal and state leaders and businesses across Navajo to prioritize aid for high school and college students who needed internet access for school and work, and waiving housing utility bills. I also worked with the Native Youth Food Sovereignty Alliance's committees, like the Public Relations and Recruitment, to establish vital services for the youth by planning to build our NIFSA social media networks. And the platform will be used to share Native voices, because I feel like there's a lot of young leaders out there doing amazing work for their communities, but their experiences are not being documented. I know that my job may be just like computer-based work, but it still is important work.
Yeah, no, I think all the work that you're doing is definitely essential, and I agree with magnifying all the youth voices so that they're heard and recognized. Lucas?
Yeah, Mariah, a way that I love to prep my new garden beds is by tilling it up first and then covering it with some black silage tarp or a regular darker colored tarp. And that tarp will help cook up all the weeds. And it'll, then after like about 2 weeks or so, I make my mounds in there and I plant in the mounds and I let weeds grow all in the walkways, and I keep trimming the weeds in the walkways. So if you're looking for any info on starting new gardens, that's how I like to do new ones. And
That's
been
brilliant, except there's willow stumps this big that I have to dig out first before I can do anything. And that has been.
Well, I don't have any experience with that, so you're on your own there. But yeah, I've been well, as I said, I'm a co-owner and operator at AllYaCO. It's AllYaCO is an Oneida word for a good heart, and we feel that that is really encompassing in how we like to farm. I think that to be around seeds and to be around plants and the soil, you need to have a good heart. You need to have a good mind. You need to have I don't know, good attitudes when you're going into the gardens. You can't be angry. You can't be, I don't know, any negative thoughts, because the plants will pick up on that. So, you know, you got to leave that outside. And so, yeah, like I said, we do vegetable production there and seed production. I'd say about two-thirds of our land goes for the market production. So we grow a lot of squash and tomatoes, lettuce, a lot of different herbs for teas. We like to work with nature there, you know. We do let our weeds grow up, but we trim it down. That helps retain water, helps retain moisture, instead of the soil just being baked and cooked by the sun and depleting nutrients. And then there's runoff when we have big rainstorms, you know, that those weeds that are actually growing there, they got roots that are holding the soil together, preventing that runoff. So we're working with nature. It might not look like everybody else's farms or other areas when they have no weeds in sight, but I'm pretty confident in the way that we're growing, that we're raising healthy seeds and healthy foods. And the last third is for our seed garden. So that's where we are just growing specifically for seeds. That whole area is just set aside for seed production. Like I said, we're growing a lot of, I think like 8 or 9 different varieties of corn that we're going to be hand pollinating, and we'll allow some of them to open pollinate. We spaced out our beans far enough away so that they can open pollinate like that. We're going to be hand pollinating a lot of our squash. We have lettuces in there and some onions and a lot of different herbs in there too. More market stuff that you're going to find at a farmer's market or in a grocery store. We're just setting aside specifically to grow seeds for ourselves and to distribute to other community members. And yeah, I'm the seed regeneration supervisor at Dream of Wild Health. So I'm doing a lot of the same stuff here of growing stuff just to save seeds for it. You know, we're not worried about productivity over here. We're not worried about meeting that bottom line per se. we're worried about treating these seeds right and raising good genetics, raising good seeds, happy seeds. We have a lot of youth programming throughout the summertime, so we're getting these youth actually getting their hands into the soil and getting them around some plants. Some of them grow up in Minneapolis and never tasted fresh food like this before. When they get to eat a fresh bean or a tomato or something like that, they're just amazed by the flavor of it. So yeah, I kind of forgot what the question was. Maybe I'm rambling, I don't know, but I think that's about all I got for you. So
No, I think you definitely answered the question. But yeah. Robert?
I basically touched on about the work I've been doing in my in agriculture lately, but I've also been hunting, fishing, that type of stuff, and getting ready for the farmers market that's going to be coming up here in a couple months. Prepping for that, seeing how we're gonna work around the COVID-19 while we're doing our farmers market. Also, around our community, we've been putting in pantry boxes so that people can put their excess amount of commodity foods that they have, so that so it just don't go to waste, and other people need them sometimes too. So we built these pantry boxes so they can put the commodities that they don't use in there, and then people that need them can take them out. And we also provide hand sanitizer and a mask in those pantries. Basically, we've been helping around the community, like I said, helping tilling people's yards up. Usually around this type of time of year, I'm usually helping, usually teaching kids gardening tips and how to garden. Usually they come into the community garden, but sadly they haven't been coming because of the whole coronavirus. But hopefully we can get back into that, showing them how to grow their own food, different techniques on preservation as well, and just teaching my community how to be self-sustainable. So basically that's what I've been doing in agriculture.
Great. Yeah, sounds like you guys have been nonstop involved in your community work, and I applaud every single one of you for that. And it's great to hear that you guys are still out there despite the pandemic. So the next question is, what is the importance of food sovereignty to you and your community? I know this sort of ties into one of the previous questions, but I guess if you guys have more to add about food sovereignty and the connection between your community and yeah, being food sovereign. So Marco.
Well, the importance of food sovereignty for us is the ability to self-sustain and pretty much thrive, especially now in this pandemic scenario. For us, it's for the general safety of our people. Being able to grow our own food is the cutting off the ties and reliance on outside food coming in, which could pose potential risk to infecting hundreds of elders that currently live on my reservation. So for us, our food sovereignty is a defense mechanism to help make us thrive in such scary times like this. And it's also a good way for us to reconnect with our culture. We are a hunter-gatherer culture. We never really did gardening as much as we do now, but even so, we still are returning back to our old ways to help us thrive in scenarios where we might be cut off from other outside sources of food, and culturally strengthen ourselves as a community.
Forgot I was muted. Awesome. Mariah?
And the fun part. I don't have a lot to add on this. I think I talked myself out about the connections that we're seeing between food sovereignty and the pandemic. So I'll let someone else talk if they have more contributions.
Right on. Kyle?
Yeah, so to me, the importance of food sovereignty is the right to own and operate sustainable agricultural productions to feed your people. The importance of food sovereignty to my community and the entire Indian country is to use native lands and regenerate indigenous foods that will beneficially revitalize language, traditions, and hold family relations closer. I see it as an opportunity to drift away from the narrative that native foods are only about governmental aid and commodities, and contemporary foods that originated during colonization, like fry bread. Or what my friend once said, the ingredients used in fry bread used to annihilate our healths, the three white killers, flour, salt, and sugar. Despite all of these controversies surrounding fry bread and its components, I believe that food sovereignty can help us remember the gifts and talents that were lost and help reshape our healthy food systems. That's all I have.
I think that's a great definition. And I agree. I think food sovereignty is definitely the tie between us and everything about our culture. So, Lucas?
Yeah, it's hard to describe the feelings that rise when I hear talk about food sovereignty, but you know, we are all of us are all are our ancestors' wildest dreams coming to life, and we are the embodiment of all of their hard work to maintain healthy foodways. And we're the ones that carry on their knowledge and to carry out all of their love that they had for the natural world, for the love that they had for the plant medicines that we were gifted every day. We're the ones that carry out their love that they have for all of our 2- and 4-legged creatures, our 2- and 4-legged relatives that continue to nurture and sustain us, all the relatives that swim in the lakes and rivers that continue to nurture us and sustain us. And we're the ones that carry on their love that they had so caringly tucked away into their the love that they had for the seeds that they so caringly tucked away into their pants or their shirts that they sewed into their shirts when they were being relocated. They brought these seeds with them because they knew that they needed to have their traditional foods, their traditional medicines wherever they were going. They needed to have that foods for us and for us to acknowledge our responsibilities as the caretakers of this lands and these waters and the skies, the seeds, and to pass on this knowledge onto our children and to leave the world a better place for our children, for the next generations. This is what food sovereignty is to me, and it's to pass on a better world for our next generations. And I don't know, that's what food sovereignty means to me. So that's all I got.
Yeah, that's a great definition. Robert?
Yeah, I basically kind of touched on it a little bit, but I feel like food sovereignty, the importance of food sovereignty is kind of, people don't really think about it too much. I feel like to be truly sovereign, a lot of people want to be labeled as sovereign nations. To be truly sovereign, you have to be food sovereign, you know? You got to be able to grow your own food. You got to be able to feed yourself. But one important thing that I feel like we've lost over time with our food is our connection with our food, connection to the food that we eat, such as, oh, when I eat a can of jam at my mom's house, oh, I remember picking those berries. I remember processing it with my mom. I remember eating it in this moment. Or whenever we can fish, I remember catching the fish with my dad. I remember putting it in the smokehouse with him. I remember that the way we were laughing while we were joking around, while we were putting it into jars and we were doing all that. I feel like we've lost that connection to our food. And I'm just hoping that we can get that connection back, you know. And I've been taught that our connection to our food is really, really important, because once your connection to your food is gone, it's pretty much like you lose that part of you. I feel like I would lose a part of myself if I lost my connection to my food that I eat. So that's why I prefer to grow and hunt and fish for my own food, because I have that connection with it, you know. And that's pretty much all I have to talk about that.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we're all definitely the next generation that'll bring back that connection with our food. And like Lucas was also saying, passing it down to the next generation and revitalizing that connection. And yeah. All right. And then this also ties into our next question. So what are some traditional foods or traditional recipes from your tribe? And if there's any cultural significance, if you mind explaining. So Marco?
Yeah, so traditionally the bands of Great Basin people, so Paiute, Shoshone, Washoe, Bannock, are described by the foods that they eat locally. People towards Pyramid Lake tend to eat more tule reeds, where people towards like Fort Hall, Idaho, tend to eat more bison and salmon. For people in my area, we're known for eating groundhogs. So those rodents that you see every Groundhog Day that look at the shadows and determine if it's wintertime or not. We eat those traditionally, and every summer we gather them when they're just ripe and right before they go down into their summer hibernation period. We harvest them by the dozens and celebrate the life that has given it to us. And we cook it traditionally underground for several hours, char the fur, everything off of it. And when you take it out of the ground, it's nice and charred, nice and really greasy. And it's probably the best part of the groundhog is like the greasiness of it. But it's a really delicious food that is like, really brings me back home to like early summers of eating it constantly. And it helps just define who my people are that live back home in Duck Valley, of what traditionally what we ate and how it's defined us from the past into now.
Awesome. That sounds really good. Mariah?
Yeah, I think for Blackfeet, obviously, there was a lot of wild game that was super important to us. You know, we think about the importance of bison, not just for feeding ourselves, but also for the important ecosystem services that they provided on the prairies. You know, some seeds are only able to germinate after they've passed through a bison's digestive system, or need the conditions created by bison wallows in order to germinate. So they're not just important for our own health and our own culture, but also to so many other things. So I think about that, and I think about the berries that we have that provided a really important source of carbohydrates and vitamins. And then of course, things that are thought of less now, but are incredibly vital and have been, is the root vegetables that we had access to. Marco talked about camas, which I mentioned, but also things like prairie turnips, which are found in sandy soils, and biscuit roots, these things that we harvested, we dried, we ground down, could be eaten like potatoes or ground into flour, or baked for a long period of time, and the sugars inside essentially caramelize, so you have almost like really sweet potato-like substances. You know, but it takes not just the harvesting knowledge and the plant identification knowledge, but also that understanding of how to prepare things so that your body's able to digest them. For certain plants, that's really important, but it's also, you know, how we eat those things to create more balanced meals. So I think there's obviously so many important foods, but it's fun to be out here and to be exploring every day and finding them.
Awesome. Kyle?
Traditional foods from Navajo are not all about blue corn, other varieties of corn, or mutton. Of course, these foods are very important to Shidinee, but I think as Diné people, we forget to mention other food groups that were made and prepared by our ancestors, like fruits and vegetables, to name a few: squash, beans, wild celery, wild onion, Navajo spinach like beeweed and pigweed, melons, and Navajo tea. And then we have our sources of proteins, such as wild game like deer and rabbit, piña nuts, squash seeds, tumble mustard seeds, and pinto beans. These foods are not taught as much as compared to blue corn and mutton because it has been commercialized and used for miscellaneous products, events, and ceremonies, branding them as popular demand. So with that being said, I would like to see from my tribe to use and teach these foods again. These foods are not mysterious to us because they are mentioned in ceremonial songs and prayers. That is the cultural significance we have, the relationship with our crops and livestock, ourselves, and the holy people. We use songs and prayers for gratitude to the holy people and ask them for protection of all crops, land, and water to regenerate.
Awesome. Love that. Lucas?
Yeah, you know, Marco, you make those groundhogs sound so tasty. I'm pretty hungry right now, but yeah, it sounds tasty. I might have to get that recipe from you later. But yeah, I think some important foods would be the corn, beans, and squash, strawberries, and other meats. You know, our corn, I was told that it's often the first food that we eat when we're brought into this world and the last food that we eat when we leave this world. So I think that's a cultural significance of the corn. And a recipe that comes to mind right away is our Gunna Stohal. It's basically a cornbread. It's I believe it's our corn with some beans on the inside and it's boiled instead of baked. And man, eat that with a little bit of maple syrup. You're living good. Yeah, that's what I got for you. So I'll pass it on.
Awesome. That also sounds really delicious. So I'm getting excited for lunch, but Robert?
Most of you guys that are on the panel probably heard me talk about a lot of the traditional foods that we got, but one of the main traditional foods that we got is very significant to my tribe specifically, which is 10 acorns. And our word for human beings is literally acorn eaters, which is Kuinyanyan. So you weren't human if you didn't eat acorns, according to our tribe, pretty much. In our eyes, we didn't believe that you were not human if you did not eat acorns. Also, fish is a very important food that we have in our community. I've been told by elders, once our fish disappear, our culture and our people disappear. So fish is really important to our community. Also hunting deer, elk was also a big part of our community. Eels or lamprey eels were a very important part of our diet too. If an elder in our community had a choice between salmon or eels, they would always go for eels because it's more tasty. Berries and other stuff like that. I think a couple recipes that our tribe has is acorn soup, which is just basically acorn powder boiled in water. I'm not totally sure on how to make it. My mom knows how to make it, but all I know is I love it. It tastes so delicious. If it's presented to me, I will eat it all. Fish on sticks, which is basically redwood sticks that are sanded down, and then we put fish on it and we let it cook over a fire. The fire usually is typically alder wood or madron wood that we cook it over, so it gives it a nice smoky taste. If that's presented to me as well, I'll devour it. So yeah, those are some traditional foods that we like to eat and some traditional recipes that we enjoy.
Awesome. Yeah, I think if any of that was put in front of me, I'd devour it too, so I don't blame you. But it's inspiring to hear all of you guys be so knowledgeable about your traditional foods and the cultural significance behind it. And that's also something I aspire to learn about my culture. So I think we have time for one more question. And so I'll ask you all, what motivates you to pursue your career or involvement in agriculture?
Okay, so what really pursues me to keep advocating and pursuing agriculture as a whole is I want to see my home community and tribal communities around my region become more self-sufficient in producing their own food and becoming more self-sovereign. Like Robert said earlier, you're not really truly sovereign until you produce your own food to sustain your own people. And I truly believe that too, that in order for us to be truly sovereign and to celebrate our sovereignty together, we must be able to have our own food to push ourselves and sustain ourselves and reconnect with our cultures to maintain, even through to withstand such as weird events such as this pandemic and other scenarios too. So that what really pushes me to advocate, or as they used to say when I was in FFA, advocate. So I really love doing what I do right now, and I will probably continue to pursue those sorts of things.
Great. Mariah.
I think a recognition that has come with studying history and seeing the ways that disconnection from our own traditional forms of agriculture has been used to force our ancestors into signing away lands, giving up sacred places, all because under a threat of starvation. It has been motivating in that it recognizes the importance and connection to our national sovereignty as tribal nations. We see the importance of feeding ourselves in that no one should ever be able to force us into doing anything by being able to hold our source of food over our head again. Plus, I think that food sovereignty is fun. Gardening is fun, seeing where your food comes from, being able to go out and bring home meat that you had a hand in raising, that you know was harvested ethically and sustainably, and that those animals had good lives on the same land where you're living. You are sharing, you're living in harmony. You're honoring the sacrifice that those animals are making. You're recognizing all of those connections, and then you're able to take that back and you're able to prepare delicious things in your own home. I think that that's just fun. It's fun to make delicious food, and it's fun to know where your food comes from, and that keeps me motivated all the time.
Great. Kyle?
Living on checkered board Navajo, where food deserts, health disparities like type 2 diabetes are on the rise, and an underdeveloped economy persists, I knew that at a young age I wanted to do something about it. The only problem was finding reliable resources and outreach centers for passionate youth in my area. Luckily, I did respond to an opportunity from the Office of Navajo Nation President and Vice President and the Community Outreach and Patient Empowerment Program partnership to recruit Navajo youth from different agencies. So the purpose was to train them to become lifetime health workers for their communities. Along the way, a former mentor from this program advertised me in the IFAI Summer Summit at the University of Arkansas. So I attended multiple summits from the IFAI and IAC in high school and college. That is where I began to notice something special about attending these events. That majority of the Native youth who attend these events are passionate leaders who want change for their communities. So I was inspired by witnessing so many talented youth leaders building service projects, speaking at large crowds, and easily collaborating with other youth. This is what motivated me to pursue a career involvement in agriculture. I was influenced by my mentors, speakers at conferences, and mostly, people I've met through IAC, IFAI, and the COPE program. So I think that with without meeting all of these special people in my life, I wouldn't have discovered my potential in pursuing a career that I enjoy so much.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I think I'm also in the same boat of being motivated through what I've seen other youth do and keeping that motivation and hoping to inspire other youth so that it goes on. Lucas?
Yeah, what motivates me? Well, I love eating tasty, healthy, fresh food straight from the ground or from a bush or freshly butchered and cooked up. Man, I love that. So that's one thing that motivates me, and I also motivate myself by wanting to wanting to live off the land in a self-sufficient way. I think that's a good motivation, and also the fact that I'm witnessing a change in people's minds about how they feel about foods. And people are taking far more interest in growing their own healthy foods. Once they actually taste some fresh food and how it's actually supposed to taste instead of some stuff that you get down at the grocery store that was shipped 1,000 miles away, and picked unripe and ripens up on the truck. Once they actually taste some fresh foods, then they're changing their minds, and now they're going to get interested in growing their own food. So that motivates me by me being able to be a part of that. If I'm helping them build their own garden or just, inspiring them in some way, I think that's what motivates me too. So, yep.
Awesome. Robert?
I feel like what motivates me the most is I feel like I was born to be doing what I'm doing. I originally wanted to be an engineer, but as soon as I started going to IAC conferences, I realized this is my passion. This is what I am supposed to be doing. Another thing that motivates me is our youth in our community, teaching them how to live the way that they're supposed to live. I'm fortunate in my community, we live where our ancestors used to live. So me growing up, I've always been in the forest, gathering and hunting. I've always been down at the river fishing, and it's the same exact places my ancestors were. And I just feel a connection to my ancestors when I'm doing those things. And I just want the kids in my community, the next generation, to have that same connection with their ancestors as well. And I just feel like one of the biggest motivations for me is our youth in our community, because I see a lot of youth in our community that don't have the connection to their food, that are sometimes starving because they don't have enough money to pay for food, and they don't know how, they just go home hungry because sometimes a lot of our kids in our community rely on food from school. So that's one big thing that was really devastating to our community, was the fact there was no school. So a lot of kids were kind of going hungry because they didn't have food for the day, because the only meal they would have is dinner that their mother would cook because she had to work all day. So that's one of the biggest things that motivate me, teaching kids how to preserve themselves. Because if I could teach a kid how to can jelly, there's so many blackberries in our community. They can go out and pick blackberries. They can can it. They can go get a loaf of bread from the diabetes center, and they can make jelly sandwiches that will feed them for the day. So that's just one thing that motivates me, is our youth. And that's basically what.
Yeah, I think that's a very good motivation, and I think that's what motivates a lot of people. So we are out of time, but I do want to thank you all for joining this panel. You guys are truly inspiring, and I know you guys will inspire so many youth along your lifetime, and you guys are really the prime example of our youth programming. And yeah, so Dan just pulled up one of our youth challenge that our youth programming is having. So essentially, you have to answer this question: how are food and agriculture helping your community get through this pandemic? With like a 3 to 5 minute video, maybe showing like a local food source or your local community center where they give out foods, and then post it to our Facebook and tag our IAC Indian Ag Youth page and do the hashtag IAC Youth Challenge, and we'll select 5 videos to be eligible to win prizes. So we have some planting sticks and cooking paddles and gift cards. So if you guys can all spread the word about that and get involved, that would be great. And then we also are doing a youth survey. So we're taking information from youth all across the nation, getting their feedback on how they're doing during this pandemic and how their community is also doing. And we'll also do winners from those selected surveys every week. We just had one yesterday, and you will get a $50 gift card if you're a winner. And then you also just get a free t-shirt for participating. So
For the prizes for the Youth Challenge, we also have a elm bark basket that will be given out as well. So pretty cool. If you want to learn more about elm bark baskets, there's a lesson on the e-learning platform. Intertribal Agriculture Council. Learn more about how to make those. Pretty cool stuff. I just made one. Just finished making one right now from bark we harvested last week. I just want to thank our youth panel. Thank you, Azalea, for pulling all this together. You're doing great work there, and just so inspiring to see all of the growth within the youth program at IAC. I know that to me, one of the most inspiring examples is our other youth coordinator, Zach Ilberry, he's actually on the board of IAC as the youth representative. And that position for a youth representative, that came from the youth. They put that proposal together, they developed it, they went to the board, and they made their case. And they had to make a pretty strong case to make it happen, but the board agreed that there needed to be a youth representative on there. And so, I don't know, to me, that's just, that's one cool example. And, just to see all this great work that people, that you're doing. We're not solving everything in the next, year or 5 years. A lot of it, it's going to be this, your generation that's going to come up with a lot of those solutions. So I think it's really inspiring, and thank you for all the good work. Keep it up, and keep pushing the rest of us along. Good job.
yeah, thanks, Dan. Thank you, guys.
Okay. We will see audience back here. We got one more panel for the day. We have our Resiliency through Agriculture panel, and starting in about 12 minutes. And that'll be our last panel of the day. Everything here is going to be, it is recorded. It's available at multiple different locations. So if you missed something, if you want to go back and check something out, you can find everything at all of the live sessions will be available on the IAC YouTube channel, the e-learning platform, and the website, intertribalfoodsummit.com. I want to thank our youth, and we'll see people back in about 12 minutes.